All right, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Marilyn, will you call the roll, please?
Bob Karstens.
Here.
Peter Doran.
Here.
John Galbraith.
Here.
Al Larson.
Here.
Kevin McEllier.
Here.
Gary Ruskowski. Dave Taylor.
Here.
Russell Clark. Chris Maxbauer.
Here, and please note that Commissioner Clark is excused. This is our first opportunity for public comment. Before we have public comment, I would like to introduce our newest commissioner, John Galbraith. John, would you just briefly introduce yourselves to the commissioners and tell a little bit about yourself?
Sure. First of all, thank you very much for having me on the commission. Thank you. Basically, I do have my bachelor's degree in Parks and Rec Administration. Got into banking almost immediately after college because, well, there wasn't a lot of Parks and Rec jobs out there. So I've spent, better part of the past 10 to 12 years in doing commercial lending here locally for Bank One, now Chase, and I work now at First Financial. And my wife and I have 3 kids. We spend a lot of time in the parks. I am using, the win-win for me is I get to use, some of my park training and skills and passion on the commission, and hope to be of benefit. So that's it in a nutshell.
Welcome.
Thank you.
All right, this is our first opportunity for public comment. Marilyn, will you read the rules for public comment, please?
Any person shall be permitted to address the Parks and Recreation Commission, which is required to be open to the public under the provision of the Michigan Open Meetings Act as amended, MCLA 15.261. Public comment shall be carried out in accordance with the following board rules and procedures. Any person wishing to address the board shall state his or her name and address. No person shall be allowed to speak more than once in the same manner, excluding commissioners' questions. The president shall control the amount of time each person shall be allowed to speak, which shall not exceed 3 minutes. Can I say chairman? The chairman may, at his or her discretion, extend the amount of time any person is allowed to speak.
Okay, if there is any public comment, please come forward and state your name.
Carl Defoe, 6505 Mission Ridge, Peninsula Township. I've been a regular swimmer at the Civic Center pool for the last 11 years, and I'm commenting about the pool lap configuration, which is item number 4 on your new business. Chris said that I could also comment after the discussion if necessary, but I just want to say that I think the situation, unfortunately, since March, when the new lap configuration was agreed, I've really been bumped more frequently and accidentally bumped more people than any time in the 11 years as a daily lap swimmer. And it's primarily because of the 2 new lap lanes. And I totally agree with Kim, that these lanes should be removed. I mean, it's a real problem, and it's a danger that did not exist prior to March 1st. I also feel strongly, Kim disagrees, but there are several of us who are medium speed swimmers. I've swam in the slow medium lane all this time, except when that lane's maybe been crowded and I'll move over into the slow lane. But I really feel that it ought to go back to the original configuration of slow, medium, and fast. It makes it easier for the lifeguards to scan the pool, not only for swimmers who may be in their incorrect lanes, but I think more importantly for anybody who may be in trouble and need assistance. It's just easier to scan from slow, medium to fast than slow, fast, medium. And it also eliminates the problem of fast swimmers being right next to slow swimmers. I mean, the way it is right now in the slow lane, the one on the extreme other side, you've got the slow group of fast swimmers right next to the slow people. And then on the other side, you've got the fastest group of fast swimmers next to the slowest group of medium swimmers. And I mean, it's just an accident waiting to happen, and several have already. And I've spelled that out in an email, several emails to Kim, and I just feel very strongly that it makes sense. Number one, go back to the original lane configuration of slow, medium, and fast, eliminate the 2 lap lanes, and everything should be really, the third situation that I commented on, I really think passing should only be allowed at the end of the pool. There's never been a problem. Like this morning, I was swimming in the slow lane. There was just one other lady who was slower than I was. Didn't have any problem at all passing her in the center, as we're supposed to do. But I would take a look, and if she was getting down towards the end of the pool, I'd simply turn around and swim back the other end. And I mean, that's never been a problem. And I think it is a problem when people are allowed to pass one another, even if these 2 lane lines are removed. If people are allowed to pass, there's just too much that a swimmer has to focus on. You know, number one, where is the swimmer immediately in front of him that he wants to pass? Number 2, is there somebody swimming towards him that may interfere with the passing? And again, it's never been a problem if you just wait until the person is at the end of the pool. And if they're close to the end of the pool, you just turn around and swim back towards the other end. And I mean, eliminating the 2 lane lines is going to open up the lanes, and I think really eliminate this problem of people bumping into one another. I mean, Judy Evans told me to speak for her. She's going to try and make this meeting, but she's had several situations that she's reported to Kim, and I had one that I let Kim know about where I got a real crack on the head, and it was just due simply because of those 2 lane lines, and they're narrow, and they don't give enough room to people who are using paddles, using fins, or are heavy set. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other public here to comment, we'll move on to special orders of business, and there is none. That takes us to the consent calendar. Marilyn, will you read the consent calendar for us, please?
The purpose of the consent calendar is to expedite business by grouping non-controversial items to be dealt with by one commission motion without discussion. Any member of the commission, staff, or the public may ask that any items on the consent calendar be removed therefrom and placed elsewhere on the agenda for full discussion. Such requests will automatically be respected. If any item is not removed from the consent calendar, the action noted, receive and file, or approval is approved by single commission action adopting the consent calendar.
All right. Would any member of the public like anything removed from the consent calendar? And I'm sorry, Marilyn, I'll read the consent calendar. Number 1, receive and file, is the Lutra report matrix. Number 2, the Rules Committee report. Number 3, the Scholarship Committee report and a letter to the Grand Traverse Band. Number 4, the Budget report as of June 14th. Number 5, strategic plan update. Number 6, communication to Doug Mirabelli. And number 7, communication to Harry Leipzig. Would any member of the board or the director like anything removed from the consent calendar? All right, I am going to remove number 7, communication to Harry Leipzig, and put it under items removed from consent calendar as number 1.
Commissioner Maxbauer, just to clarify, referrals and approvals is also included in the consent
Thank
calendar.
you. There are no referrals. We do have approvals. Parks Board regular minutes of May 20th, 2010.
Madam Chair, just a clarification, item number 5, the strategic plan update, it says a verbal report will be given, so how do we receive and file that?
The director is going to cover that in his director's report, but thank you for asking, Commissioner.
I move we approve the consent calendar with the change.
I support.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Motion carries. Okay, item removed from consent calendar. I removed this item, communication to Harry Leipzig. Jason, I received a call 2 days ago from Harry, and he's still waiting for information, background information, that the parks rules that we have to date. He's not received anything yet. Would you check to see what has been sent out so that he has something before Monday morning's Rules Committee meeting?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Number 1 in old business, Habitat for Humanity Flower and Garden Show billing. Jason?
The first opportunity I had to discuss the Habitat for Humanity bill that this commission heard about at our last meeting was Tuesday. I have not received the initial information from Habitat for Humanity, so I do not have an update to give at this point. I will have one at our next meeting, though.
All right. Next on the agenda, Easling Pool membership report. Kim, did you want to say anything, or does the commission have any questions for Kim?
This is what you guys had asked for at the last meeting, comparing the membership numbers over the past couple of years and where we are as of currently. So.
Thank you. This is a good report, Kim. Is it possible that we can break out revenue so that we can see how much revenue we're generating?
I actually have some of those figures. I wanted the finance department to be able to look at it before I attached it officially to the report. But in what I've found, total membership sale and renewal from May in 2009 was $3,006. Total membership and sale renewal for May 2010 is $5,394.
All right.
Comment.
Al?
Comment, Kim. Based on our discussion at the last month's meeting, I decided to man up and go buy my annual pass. So as I come in and swim in the afternoons in that sort of 2 to 6 time frame, because there's lots of open space to swim. I had a lot of trouble finding anyone that would take my money and to pay for that. So I think it was the third attempt finally when there was a person sitting at that front window, and I was able to pay my $189 and do all that. Otherwise, at least for that afternoon time, it really seems to be that I could just come in and go swim for free forever. And so just something to consider. I'm not sure what your manning schedule is or plan for that, but I had a lot of difficulty actually buying the pass.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
All right. Next on our agenda, executive limitation policy. This is something that I am strongly in favor of. I'm wondering how far along the commission is on the Carver book. Can I get some feedback? I mean,
So,
Commissioner Karstens?
should I report first? I'm on about page 200.
Wow,
155.
all right. Geez, you guys count. Commissioner Doran?
I'm only just barely into it, about 15, 20 pages.
What I would like to do is I would like to begin or spend a certain amount of time, be it 5, 10, 15 minutes at every meeting, starting taking a look at these policies and adopting one at a time. If no one objects, I guess I will just start with executive limitation policy number 1, and I would like the board to adopt that policy as our first executive limitation. And for members of the public that may be watching, it says, the CEO shall not cause or allow any organizational practice, activity, decision, or circumstance that is either unlawful, imprudent, or in violation of commonly accepted business and professional ethics and practices. So in a nutshell, what this policy says is Jason's not allowed to break the law, and nor is his staff. So, what are
Madam Chair.
your feelings on that?
Yes. To start the discussion, I'll make a motion to approve that policy as read into the record.
Is there support?
I'll support it.
Discussion. Commissioner Larson?
I struggled with Mr. Carver's description of this. It all sounds well and good. In my opinion, we already have laws that say you can't break the law, so that part of it doesn't interest me. The part that interests me is the word imprudent or commonly accepted business and professional ethics and practices, because his major point was we as a commission are not the super director. We don't do Jason's job. We don't sit over there and micromanage him and tell him how to do this and that. We give him limitations. And I'm all for that concept. The difficulty is that what I consider to be imprudent, maybe Jason doesn't, or maybe Kevin thinks that's fine and I don't. And so I almost feel like those types of words then grind me right back down into becoming a super CEO for Jason's position. So I'm not really sure how to take that level 1 thing saying, do the right thing, and execute that as a commissioner. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yes. Really what the book, the process is you start with a big global policy and then you drill down. You give examples or limitations on what you as a board believe is imprudent, so that he has direction on what he can and can't do. This is just the first step.
So the key in our execution, or actually in our setting of limitations, is going to be, as we get down to the lower levels, how specific are we going to be?
How specific are we going to be? Yes. And my vision is not to adopt this one policy as of tomorrow. My goal is to take a look at these policies, start with level 1, then go to level 2, your treatment of consumers, your financial planning, et cetera, and adopt it all at once. It's going to be a work in progress. We're not going to be able to do this in one meeting. This is just the beginning, and it's the big step. Commissioner Doran.
This is really lemonade. I mean, these things here are just common sense statements. CEO shall not allow the board to be uninformed or unsupported in its work. I mean, these are normal expectations. On the one hand, I don't even think we need them. On the other hand, I mean, there's no harm in having them. In fact, they may serve as some limitation on us. Unless we tell the CEO, this is imprudent.
It really is a limitation on the board.
Or it is so basically imprudent, then, it's a roadmap for us in saying, okay, we have to express ourselves, because my thought about what's imprudent and yours or Al's, that doesn't matter. It's only when a majority of this commission say, hey, it's imprudent to, not close the parks at a certain time or something like that. And then that would be the expression of what was imprudent rather than our own individual thoughts. So
You are exactly right. This really does limit the board more than it limits the director. These policies actually free up the director. But we don't have to do them.
Well, until we go down to lower and lower levels where we constrain the director more and more, which, how many different aspects do we do? That's a difficult question.
It is.
So, my reaction to executive policy number 1 was almost identical to Al's.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly with violation of commonly accepted practice and the imprudence word because of the definition. And so, qualified as you did, I can see some sense to it, but if it were to stand alone, it would be dangerous as a Dickens, and so.
It doesn't stand alone.
And so, if it's understood from the beginning that that's an introduction to something to go further, or be further defined, then it's cool. So, but my first reaction was just like Al's, and I just thought I would put that out there. But then I also appreciated the clarification by Mr. Doran.
So,
So where do we go from here?
well, you already know my preference. My preference is to move forward with executive limitations policies, ENDS policies, giving the director what I believe is a clear path on where we want him as a board to go. It also limits us as to how deep we're going to get into what he does. And I truly believe it's going to be beneficial to the board, and I truly believe it's going to be beneficial to Jason. I think it will make him a more successful director. That's just my personal opinion. But if the board does not think so, then...
No, in terms of the book, I agree with you. It seems like the intent of the book is to more clearly define what our responsibilities are and what his are, so that both of us can do our jobs expeditiously.
We play our position.
So,
Commissioner Larson?
I do strongly support the overall theme of Carver's book, and I support the objective of where this is going. I don't have a clear vision of where the end destination is or how to get there, so I put my support behind doing this, not knowing exactly where it's going and understanding that we'll have to learn a little bit as we go.
I appreciate that. Again, if we... Let's try to clarify that we are not going to adopt this policy as of tomorrow. We're going to put executive limitations policies and policies together as a board and adopt it as a whole package or not. Working on it one step at a time. And if along the way, I don't want to eat up every single meeting doing this, spending an hour on this. I want to maybe limit it to 5 or 10 minutes, take a look at each policy one at a time, and adopt it as a package. And so, are you willing to be adventurous?
the package gives it context, it seems to me.
I'm sorry?
The package gives it context.
Yes,
And
Commissioner Doran.
So I think it's good.
So the motion should be changed to tentatively adopt.
Tentatively adopt.
Subject to an overall executive limitations policy.
Support. Oh, excuse me.
Tentatively adopting, which means supporting. We support that statement as read. Are we in consensus, including the word imprudent? So if we're tentatively adopting, I consider that the same as I support that statement, and I'll change my motion to reflect that.
And will the supporter change his?
Yes.
Commissioner Galbraith, did you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I guess it was somewhat brought up, but So are these being adopted in the John Carver adaptation of an organizational structure? Is that what we're trying to accomplish? A more organized way of feeding
What I'm trying
information?
to accomplish is to better define the Parks Board's role and to better define the director's role, so that we each play our positions, and we, in my mind, it eliminates the micromanagement of the Parks Department. You adopt policies, which the director follows. That's it. Commissioner Doran.
I'd like it clear that what's before us is this number 1,
Yes.
because the preamble that's before that talks about something called an ends policy. And when we get down to some of these limitations that also talk about an ends policy, I'm not going to vote for them unless we have whatever the heck that ends policy is in a written format. Because I am unclear as to whether that's our strategic plan or this plan or that plan, but if we're going to have something adopted that limits Jason or us, I want to see that document and know exactly what it says.
Absolutely. All right, we have a motion before us. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Motion carries. Thank you all very much. I think down the road, we're going to be happy that we're going this way, and I think Jason's going to benefit from it.
Okay. Looking ahead, are we to prepare to come to consensus on the next levels of policies as stated here?
Well, I don't want to eat
Not
up...
right now, right?
Yeah, I don't want to eat up a lot of
Yeah.
our time.
just have a
Next meeting, and I will also try to give some clarification as to Mr. Doran's concerns about ends policies, et cetera, et cetera. I will listen to the videotape of our meeting, and I will try to address those concerns as best I can. And Jason?
I'm completely fine with Executive Limitations Policy 1, because it is very general knowledge. But as we get into the level 2 and as we continue down this path, I'm comfortable with it, but one of the things, as I understand in Carver, is it says talk about eliminating current practices or eliminating current practices in order to make the shift towards these new limitations, to these new policies. And I'm concerned that some of this may change my job description as it stands by itself. So that's something that I want to bring up at this point, or it may require additional resources or changes in resources in order for me to fulfill these policies. And I just want to bring that up at this point as we continue down this path.
All right, thank you. Next on our agenda is new business, park rules, non-motorized trails at Vasa Trailhead.
The Park Rules Committee has been working for quite a while in regards to putting park rules in each individual park. Although a couple items have come up recently, and they're pretty easy or pretty understandable and pretty common knowledge type rules, but I wanted to bring them before this commission. I was notified by the TART Trails, and Commissioner Karstens was involved in the email in regards to motorized vehicles traveling down the Meadows Path at Vasa Trailhead. I was asked to put some signs up saying no motorized trails, but it was suggested that we follow the land use rules that the county's adopted. I did some research. The county doesn't have land use rules specifically. So the next best step was for the Parks and Recreation Commission to pass a park rule that will then move on to the Resource Management Administration Committee for their approval and on to county board approval, prohibiting motorized trail usage at Vasa Trailhead. The Rules Committee has been working through some suggested rules by Midland County Parks, and I took this rule, as I've drafted it right now, I took this rule directly from those, and it reads, on lands owned or under control of the department, it is unlawful for a person or persons to do any of the following: to operate operate an off-the-road motor-driven vehicle such as a mini bike, motorcycle, dune mobile, snowmobile, converted snowmobile, amphibious vehicle, or any other motorized device except on designated roads, trails, or areas posted for such use without proper written permission at Vasa Trailhead property. This is park-specific for Vasa Trailhead, and I make the recommendation that the commission makes a motion to adopt that rule. This non-motorized use at this trail is a standard practice, and it has been for several years.
Commissioner Doran?
The way it's written is somewhat confusing as to whether it's limited to the Vasa Trailhead. Because the limiting clause at Vasa Trailhead property is at the very end, and at the very beginning, it talks about on lands owned and under the control of the department. So, I mean, if it said, and I'm not sure exactly, Jason, maybe you could explain what land is the Vasa Trailhead? What geographically, what exactly is this? And then maybe I would support it if I had an understanding of what the property is. But in its current version, it doesn't
Okay.
express, and I know you got it from Midland, but I still don't like it.
Our overriding park rules that we have adopted, the last sentence leading into the clause of things that are prohibited in parks is on lands owned or under the control of the department, it is unlawful, et cetera, et cetera. So essentially, the rule is just what I've got listed as number 1 there.
Well, I'm not prepared this evening to prohibit snowmobiles and other motorized vehicles on every piece of property that's under the control of the Parks and Rec Department, simply because I don't think anybody's analyzed all that.
Okay, what I'm looking for is, I guess what I'm looking for in this is just specifically eliminating motorized trail usage at Vasa Trailhead.
Okay, and what do you consider the Vasa Trailhead to be?
The park property off of Beitner Road, leading, where everyone parks, that lead into, Bartlett Road, excuse me, that lead into the trailheads, and in this instance specifically, the Meadows Trail.
Okay, so why didn't you just say the Meadows Trail? Or maybe Bob, I mean, is that the right way to say it?
I was thinking possibly it would be better to just say the Meadows Trail because there's signage on most of the rest of the trail saying that motorized vehicles are limited. There's no signage on this particular, the Meadow Trail, because that is owned by the county, and it's not on state land or on specifically the Vasa Parkland.
Yeah.
So
The other non-motorized signage is on state land.
Could we just make this rule just apply to the Meadows Trail?
Well, yes, we can.
We-
I mean,
by
we
all
can
means.
make
for
the
time
rule
being,
however
that
we
would be
choose.
good.
But would that solve there were 1 or 2 specific instances?
That's where they've been coming on. They've continued on at times, but the Meadows Trail is where it's most vulnerable because it's so wet. There's seeps, and there's a real high clay barrier, and so whenever someone goes on it, because of the deep ruts that they create. So, and it's destructive to the trail and to the work that's constantly being done, putting wood chips and stuff where all the seeps are so that they can freeze over and be smooth for the years.
What if it said on the Meadows Trail, owned and under control of the department at the Vasa Trailhead?
I have no problem with that.
Can we say that again, Marilyn?
I'm sorry, on the Meadows Trail,
At the Vasa Trailhead, or on the Meadows Trail on land owned and under the control of the department at the Vasa Trailhead property. It is unlawful, et cetera.
Is that a motion?
Motion.
Is there support?
I would support it. I think, I'm
Discussion. Commissioner Karstens?
from the very beginning, the addition at the end of at the Vasa Trailhead property just kind of confuses me. And so, I want anything in place that would allow them to put such a sign up on the county property so that when somebody tries to come in from Bunker Hill Road, where they may come in, they'll see that sign and hopefully obey it. And then also, with the sign there in this past, it gives the Sheriff's Department authority to cite
Remove
them in some
anyone.
way.
Yeah.
To prevent it. And so, so it's the Meadow Trail that it primarily is being, that we can't post signs on because it's county property. And whereas on the Vasa Trailhead, there's a parking lot where cars are allowed, but
Right.
they aren't allowed out on the rest of the trail. And I think there's signs to that effect already there. So, just saying,
So what you're looking for is a sign on county property that will prohibit or let people know that they are prohibited from using motorized vehicles
on that.
on that trail.
On the Meadow Trail, right. And to say that they could, without written permission by the Vasa authority, would be good.
Ah,
Should be, it's our,
It's our
property,
park,
should be our
it's our
written
park
permission.
land.
But,
And I
but
don't
it's
know that
mowed,
we,
it's mowed by the Vasa, and it's groomed by the Vasa for the skiers. And the Vasa has put signs, that's where the dogs are permitted, because they aren't on the rest. So,
I'll tell you what, why don't we, instead of passing this right this minute, why don't we refer this to the Rules Committee? The Rules Committee's going to meet Monday morning, and we can have Jason give us a map, and Bob, please attend the Rules Committee meeting, and if you can.
I have to look at my, what time is it?
9, I believe.
Yeah.
If memory serves me, but it doesn't always.
That's the 21st?
Yeah,
Yeah, I can do that. So I should put it down?
yeah.
And where is it? At the office, the Civic Center?
It's at the Civic Center. Is the board okay with referring this to the Rules Committee rather than passing this motion now,
I
or do you
think-
want to pass it now, Commissioner Doran?
I think you need to take a vote on the motion.
We do.
Well, if we withdraw the motion and instead refer it to the Rules Committee, I'd like the Rules Committee to have authority to adopt, delegate to them the authority to adopt this, and then refer it to Ways and Means, so it doesn't have to wait until our July meeting.
Ways and Means was yesterday. It would be referred, I think, to the county board meeting at the end of the month.
Okay. I'd like to do something to speed up the process, because this is a problem that's happened more than once, right,
Yes.
Bob?
Well,
Somebody's driving around on the trail and
Right. And they seem to always pick the time right after rain.
well, we can pass this right now. I mean, we don't have to refer it to Rules. We have a motion on the floor. I'll take a vote. We'll see if it goes. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same. We're done.
So, can there be another, my intent was to take this to Resource Management Administration, and if this commission wants to speed it up.
It'll go
You're-
on at the county board meeting at the end of the month. That's if you want to speed it up.
Is a motion necessary? Typically, we're supposed to follow that process unless it's some type of a emergency, or if there's some,
Well, I mean, if we have destruction of property, if our property is being damaged, I think that the county board is not going to have a problem moving forward quickly. I can't imagine they would. I certainly wouldn't. All right, next, Medalley Park waterfront.
The next item is we also do not have a park rule related to swimming, bathing, wading at Medalley Park. I've talked with the City Parks and Recreation Department in regards to the signage that they have in Hall Park, which is on the north end of north end of Boardman Lake. And they actually have a city ordinance that states swimming, diving, wading, and bathing are prohibited within, I don't recall if their exact language mentions Boardman Lake or within Hall Park. But in order to keep things consistent around Boardman, I think that rule fits very well. It's the 3 common locations that people could utilize the water at Medalley, and make a recommendation that the board adopts a rule that states swimming, diving, wading, and bathing are prohibited within Medalley Park.
Commissioner Doran?
What's the harm?
The harm is the bottom of the lake. There are sharp drop-offs.
I mean, is it harming some sort of aquatic life there, or is it disturbing the fowl, or, I mean, or is it just that you're worried about the guy who jumps in the water?
I'm worried about the guy that jumps in the water.
Okay. I'm not, so if the guy wants to jump in the water, that's perfectly fine with me.
Commissioner Karstens?
Has have the contaminants been totally removed? Cone Drive and Gear has undertaken a cleansing process for the contaminations that were on the west side, and if, so that it's not always it was not always the safest place to go swimming or something like that because of the presence of the contaminants. And so I don't know if that's an element to be concerned about or not. And it seemed to me that they had cleaned up most of it, but I'm not sure if they are continuing that process. Do you know anything about that,
I
Kevin?
know that they had undertaken that process, and there was a phase 2 of it, but of course, that property is very far away from Medalley Park. You know, that's more on the northwest side versus
Right.
Medalley Park.
I understand that.
Being south and east, so there are some not getting off topic, there are some hazardous conditions, you know, at Medalley Park, rocks, roots, current. I respect Commissioner Doran's opinion that swim at your own risk, but perhaps, Jason, could you elaborate, why did the city enact that ordinance at Hull Park?
When I spoke with Lauren Vaughn, their director, he mentioned that there were sharp drop-offs. He mentioned there were challenges with the bottom, challenges with sharp drop-offs, things of that nature. Uneven bottom.
I can't imagine, I mean, I go out to Medalley Park, but it's never occurred to me to jump in the water out there.
Is there any liability with allowing entrance to the lake
If we,
through county park?
swimming isn't a predominant activity in Medalley Park or in Boardman Lake for that matter. And I can't speak to the cleanliness of the lake historically. It's my suggestion, instead of posting signs, that we have to post some signs, and it either needs to say unsupervised swim area, swim at your own risk, or it's something along these lines: swimming, diving, wading, and bathing are prohibited. It worries me that if we put a sign up suggesting unauthorized or unsupervised swim area, swim at your own risk, that we're encouraging swimming in an area that may not be the safest for patrons, and a practice that typically does not occur in Medalley Park. Some of the areas are in wetland-type areas where the river flows into Medalley Park, and that would be of some concern to me because of the current, because of the sediment in the lake. So that's my stance on it. I would prefer this versus suggesting swim at your own risk.
But you don't have to put any sign up.
Yeah,
You just have it, we've got tons of shoreline that just don't have any sign.
Does someone? I'm sorry.
We've put signs regarding unsupervised swim area, swim at your own risk at all of our parks that have waterfront access.
I think you use that kind of sign, Jason, where you want people to, you're encouraging people to swim, you just don't want to lead them to believe that there's a lifeguard lurking around somewhere to assist them in rescue.
And that's what we put these other signs up for, so.
I don't see the need for this regulation. And I won't be at the next Rules Committee meeting, but at the next one, I'd like to raise an issue, because it appears that when we adopt a rule, then that's adopted by the county board, it's a misdemeanor. Is that right? So, I mean, if I'm waiting at Medalley Park, I'm committing a misdemeanor. That just doesn't seem appropriate to me. I'd like to change our process if I can, so that it would be either a civil infraction or maybe just a common trespass, so the cop can say, or deputy can say, get out of here. And if you
And
don't,
honestly, that was the impression that I had, or when we passed the smoking rule at the Civic Center. I thought what this board was passing was a civil infraction. I was surprised when I heard that from our council, Bob Cooney, at the county, that the county board, by state law, has to pass all the rules that we pass. So I'm going, you know,
But does
so,
that,
and just from the standpoint of the county's expense,
yeah,
if they have a rule or an ordinance that's a misdemeanor, there's police time, there's court time. I mean, it's a tremendous, not a tremendous, but it has an economic burden.
Well, yeah,
on the
it
county,
certainly
unfortunately.
does.
So I don't, unless I really see the need, as I do with the motorized vehicles on the trail, I just don't, I'm not in favor of this.
I'm not hearing a motion, so I guess we will move on. I will add, Commissioner Doran, that I will give Mr. Cooney a call tomorrow, and I will talk to him about what process, if there is one, that we can use as a board so that we can do civil infractions versus misdemeanors. That's all I can offer.
Or even, if you could also ask them, could we just adopt a rule, we have control of the care and custody of of the county's park recreation property. It's like the road commission has care and custody of the road commission property. They can say, you know, no parking over here, or you can't picnic over here, or whatever, and if somebody doesn't follow that sign, and they don't stop doing it, then they're trespassing, which is against the law, and the police officer can get involved. But in the, 99.9% of the time, if they're just told to stop it, they stop it. And so, in addition to the civil infraction potential, I'd like to see just be able to have care and custody rules adopted by the Parks and Recreation Commission when we don't want it to rise to an actual case, a civil infraction, or misdemeanor.
All right. I'll give Mr. Cooney a call tomorrow, and after I ask him and hear from him, I'll email Jason, and he can forward it on to I'll let everybody know what he says, and he can forward it on to commissioners.
Commissioner Maxwell?
Yes, I'm sorry, Commissioner.
In connection with park rules,
Yes.
can I speak to that issue at the end of this meeting before we adjourn?
Of course.
Just because I represented us at the Nature Education Reserve, and their rules was brought up, and
You know, I'm glad you mentioned that. When we start in on our budget discussion, the Nature Education Reserve budget is under, in the budget book, and it's under the Parks Department. So thank you for bringing that up. I want to ask Jason about that when we get to budget. You certainly may comment on that. Next on our agenda, consideration of creating a budget policy. Commissioner?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I requested to introduce this agenda item, the consideration of creating a budget policy. My intent was to initiate to discuss the discussion and determine if other members also felt it would be beneficial in creating such a policy to fulfill our responsibilities and give some guidance. What precipitated this was our recent strategic planning, where personally, in my opinion, we were creating wish lists, but we didn't have any budgetary guidelines. So as a result of that, in the last few months and hearing a variety of values relative to budgeting, being expenditures or revenues or spending patterns. Therefore, I felt that now may be a good time to enable that discussion. And to start that process, then I guess I would have to make a motion that we create a budget policy. Let me clarify that I would also recommend that we work on this during the strategic planning session. It's not something just like the executive limitations policy that we want to create tonight. I'm just trying to get some feedback to see if members think it would be beneficial rather than limiting to create such a budget policy. And I submitted 5 pages in our packet that gave you some ideas to get you thinking about the benefits and constraints that may be associated with such a policy. So again, I make a motion that we create a budget policy.
I'll support for discussion purposes. I actually think that Commissioner McKellier has a good idea, and I say that, and we'll touch upon this when we get to the 2011 budget review, but I say that because there are some items that the director submitted, and we received the, well, I may as well just move on ahead to the a little bit about the 2011 budget review. Jason, you submitted a request for a $27,000 SUV new vehicle for the department. If we have a clear budget policy that says you are going to budget your money, you're going to run your department within the constraints of the amount of money that you receive through revenue and allocation from the county board, that item wouldn't have been in here. The county board at Ways and Means, and I don't know if, I doubt any of you sat through 3 hours of television Wednesday morning watching the Ways and Means Committee meeting, but the county board, the county administrator is going to ask all departments to reduce expenses from last year approximately 7 or 8% per department. So without a policy in place, Jason's asking for a $27,000 SUV four-wheel drive. Well, if that policy is in place, then Jason would have to come to us as a board and tell us what staff position he's eliminating so he can buy his vehicle. He would have to operate within those constraints. So I do think a budget policy is a good idea, and I think we should have the discussion at strategic planning. So we have a motion on the floor. Is there any discussion from any other commissioners? Commissioner Larson.
Kevin, on these pages that you supplied, it appeared that the first paragraph was what you wrote, and everything after the word recommendation then was excerpts from some other publication? Is that
From research, correct. The first few pages I quote from John Carver's book, as footnoted, pages 133 to 145. He gives a lot of great ideas. And then just a variety of Googling, I had hoped in a perfect world that there was a budget policy statement already out there that we could tweak and apply to and consider as a full board. I'm not finding one. I'm finding bits and pieces, and you can see steps of it. And so to answer your question, right, that was all copied material that I wanted to get the thought juices, kind of considering options. On that note, I just want to add, we were already talking about this with executive limitations. John Carver says that our policies should not be too narrow. The board turns on the degree of narrowness and the degree of fuzziness. If we get too narrow, we get too limited, and it works both ways. But just as Madam Chair had mentioned, certain limitations, i.e., I'll just hypothetically throw out there that maybe a policy might say, spending ratios shall not exceed revenue ratios, so that we keep in balance, just like all our citizens are balancing their spending with their revenues. So, of course, that's a specific statement, but that's what I use as an example, and there might be statements like that in our budget policy.
You wouldn't necessarily have, as an example, you could say, for instance, your expenses are not going to be more than 3 times your revenue or 4 times your revenue. I mean, it doesn't have to be dollar for dollar. But I really think that a budget policy would have been helpful before this. Commissioner Doran.
I'd very much appreciate if Kevin could take a stab at one before we sit down and look at it. I'm wondering, are there any other, the Road Commission or Commission on Aging or any other of the organizations that have some kind of guidelines for budgets?
Yes.
Do they?
Yes. And I would be happy to, I would be happy to, before we sit down, provide some of those.
The main question for me, I mean, we are, Parks and Recreation are subsidized by tax money. And what's appropriate? I mean, what level of subsidization is appropriate to call on, a share of the tax money for the function of parks and recreation? I think that's a question that we could grapple with in the policy statement.
You're right, we've got to do the heavy lifting. This is our job. We've got to, and I couldn't find anything out there, to answer your question, that we could modify. So we've got to do the heavy lifting. We've got to create one that fits the consensus of this board, just as you had articulated. So again, the motion on the floor is, do you believe a policy would be beneficial? Yes or no?
Can I?
Commissioner Carstens?
Yeah, most of my contributions will be out of ignorance because I haven't been party to this kind of process before. And however, it seems to me that having a plan should precede what policies we make. And so so we kind of got it backward. And so then are we going to retrofit our plan to fit our budget policy? Heath Carver says your plan should drive what you do, not your budget. And so I feel the need to have this plan in place, and I think it's extremely important. But it's also important that I don't know what your budget process has been in the past, and has it always been incumbent upon the Parks and Rec Commission to come up with a budget?
No.
I got the feeling that it was not.
No.
Our prerogative or our
No.
responsibility, and so this is something new.
One of the things I liked about what Commissioner McKellier said was he said, let's do it in conjunction with the strategic plan. So we can have a plan in place, and then we can, after we have our plan, we can do a budget policy accordingly. But Commissioner Carstens, the Parks and Rec Board, this will be the first time that the Parks and Rec Board will be recommending a budget to the county board. And when we get to the discussion, this is not a budget and I told the administrator and I told the county board yesterday morning at Ways and Means, this is not a budget that I can recommend. But you'll get your shot in just a second. Mm-hmm. Commissioner Galbraith.
Yeah, I guess, speaking out of ignorance, I think it was said best. So it hasn't been, for the year 2010, the department head presenting a budget and having the commission either okay it or...
No. In the past, the county administrator presents the budget to the county board.
Okay.
The county board then goes through the budget department by department and adds, subtracts, asks questions, et cetera, et cetera. This year is going to be very different. And Commissioner McKellier, of course, is an old, experienced person. I was an old hand in terms of the budget process at the county. This will be the first time that the Parks Board is going to be going through the budget, which is one of the reasons that I went back to 2007 and tried to group everything so everybody could see where the money's been spent over in the past and in what areas and what we're going to have to be considering. This will be the first time, and it'll be interesting. Jason.
In regards to whether or not a policy is appropriate to create at this time, we haven't finalized our strategic plan yet. And it states right here in Carver, the debated board values create the policy. We've got, right now, I've got, and this is part of the reason I've been driving for a strategic plan, is so I have one agreed upon, or one set of agreed upon values. Right now, frankly, I feel as though there are 10 different commissioners, they have 10 different sets of values that will be driving the policy. You know, one of the things that I'll be talking about in my director's report is when one of our last meetings for this strategic plan will be taking place next week, I believe. So to know that we're a week away from having values that this board feels are appropriate in creating this policy is a good thing. And I think we need to wait to see those values before a policy like this can be created. One of the things, and Commissioner Maxbauer doesn't like the items that I put forth for the 2011 budget, but that's our next agenda topic. One of the things that I've put in that is an addition of a full-time staff person to deal with recreation programs. It's something that this board has talked about as one of its goals. And I would imagine if we adopt this Carver policy, that will eventually be one of the ends policies is creating parks and recreation programs. But until those values have been finalized and until this commission decides that that's what our strategic plan is, I think we're putting the cart before the horse in creating a policy. As far as the budget's concerned, well, I'll talk about that in the next issue. But I think talk about creating a policy, it's too early until this commission figures out what its philosophical and what its direction is going to be through the strategic planning process.
Actually, Jason, I think you sound like you're in agreement with Commissioner McCallier. He's just saying do it in conjunction with or after we have our strategic plan. Commissioner Larson?
My point exactly.
So I think really that's really what you're saying, isn't it?
That's my point. I see.
And you are actually in agreement.
This is a value issue that coincides with strategic planning, so.
All right. I'm sorry.
I bring it up because I believe it was left out of our strategic planning process. It is a value, should be incorporated in that process. So hopefully when we walk away, when we finish the strategic planning process, we'll have those values prioritized that we've already worked hard on, and we'll introduce this value and policy, consider policy as well.
All right. We have a motion on the, Commissioner Karstens?
Just some desire for some clarification in the sense that, in terms of my experience with planning, the master plan is your vision. It's what you want your future to be. And your strategic plan is how you realize that. And so to me, when I hear strategic plan mentioned, that's like an action plan that you want to jump to immediately, but it's based on a vision. And so, to me, you need your vision first, which is your master plan, and then your strategic plan, and then your budget and your policy. Your policies are actually part of your master plan, but your strategic plan is your action plan to realize that. And so that's a clarification I would like to put forward. That's all.
We have a motion. We have a motion on the floor. All those in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed, same. Motion carries. Jason, 2011 budget review, pages 56 through 98 in your packet.
Okay, within the introduction to this budget, or the budget information, I mentioned a budget timetable that I referred to. This is sitting on your desk. I omitted that from your packets. That timetable is sitting on your desk this evening. So, and in discussing the budget process, it's challenging because this commission has never been involved, and I applaud the commission for being involved. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the challenges with that, and I don't think that they're challenges that we can't overcome. But we have a very unusual, or very challenging budget timetable that's handed down from the county administrator's office. For instance, on May 14th, the departments we were sent the information to create for this budget, and they had to be turned in by May 24th. So a 10-day turnaround on the capital projects, all the changes in personnel, all the changes in our IT, those type of things. So that presented one small challenge because it's 10 days to turn this around, but it was 10 days in between seeing this commission. Moving from what we've done in the past in the budgeting process in the past, it was simply submitting a variety of budget requests, like a $27,000 four-cylinder all-wheel drive vehicle, to let the county know that our vehicle is slowly fading, and that in order for us to get around town safe, in order for us to get to meetings safe, we need to start thinking about a new vehicle. So I submitted that in the budget. We've never had a strategic plan. This commission's never shown what direction it wants to head. So throughout the course of the past year, I've taken notes and realized the projects and realized the issues that we have and submitted those for the budget approval process. I know that everything that I've submitted here isn't going to get passed. But I also don't have anything to back it up from the commission saying this is part of our strategic plan. So with the lack of direction over the past year from this commission in deciding, Jason, this is the direction we want to head with this is the direction we want to head with that. I've put together the budget requests very similar to the way they've done in the past, trying to fix problems that have occurred over the past year. It's not my intent to ask this commission at this point to prioritize these issues or prioritize the information in this packet. I'm presenting this information to you tonight, and I'd like to walk through each of these individual items if the commission would like, or I can just take questions about the information that you have questions about. So that's kind of where we're at with the budgeting process. The budgeting process has also been pushed back. It's been delayed. The next step, budget meetings with department heads, if necessary, that were to occur on the 27th, haven't started, and they probably won't happen until early July. So this is really changing the budget timeline, and I haven't received any updated budget timeline, so I can't tell the commission when the Board of Commissioners is going to move forward. That could be a good thing, and it could be a bad thing in the fact that we may be able to be in contact more in regards to what's going to happen in the budget, but it could also be a bad thing in case the commission says we're going to speed this process up. That being said, never having worked with the commission, the Parks and Recreation Commission before in regards to developing the budget, I'd like to kind of open the floor up for some discussion about how you guys want to be involved. Do we want to hold additional meetings? Do you want me to work with one or two commissioners to work through this process? I'd like to open the floor up for discussion.
Commissioner Doran.
I think we need a special meeting to go through, study the budget that you have tentatively proposed, and be able to ask questions before the meeting and at the meeting. And then I think we need to set a realistic timetable for ourselves on adopting a recommended budget. And I'm thinking it's probably going to be around August 1st.
Commissioner McKellier.
Two questions for the director. Number one, am I hearing you say this budget timetable is inaccurate? It's useless?
I don't know. I'm not willing to go so far as to say it's useless. To say it's inaccurate, we've got the first three items that have not occurred, that should have occurred last month.
Great, so we'll expect some updated accurate dates, but you're right, the budget steps are still in there.
And keep in mind, I don't create those dates. Those dates are handed to me, and I'm happy to turn them around to you as soon as I have them.
In the reality check, I did watch the 3-hour observed Ways and Means meeting, and basically, it's...
Good for you.
There's a new paradigm shift coming down, that it's based on revenues rather than expenditures, and there's going to be some ratios.
And that is exactly true.
Ratios.
Those words came out of the county administrator's mouth. He also said that there will be no new vehicles in 2011.
And there is also a hiring freeze on staff, so there's a couple of policies that we've got to be compliant with. But I'm thinking that this work that you've done is going to change drastically, these vehicles, et cetera. So in follow-up to Commissioner Doran's, I agree that this probably requires a special meeting, but there's a sequence of steps. Just as Commissioner Carson's mentioned, we've got to get the values and our plan developed first, and then we apply that to the budget. And That's where I think we're heading with this. So I'm in agreement, but I'm thinking that some of this information we've been given, I'm not even going to review. It's unrealistic at this point.
I do have a couple of questions, Jason. What input do you have with the Nature Education Reserve, with their budget, if any?
None. It's something the NER typically works directly with Dennis and with Dean and Finance to discuss that budget.
Okay, but yet the Parks Department is charged for the Nature Education Reserve.
We have a management agreement for the Nature Education Reserve property, and that's a large portion of that budget.
Okay.
That's paid quarterly, and that's a long-term, I want to say, it's a long-term agreement. I think it's a 5-year agreement, or it's not a long-term agreement, 5-year agreement at a time, and that's something that we pay to the Grand Traverse Conservation District in order for them to manage the Nature Education Reserve.
All right. The next question I have for you, some of these questions, you need to answer them right now, because you certainly may not have the answers right now. These are just questions that I'm going to ask now so that you can prepare answers when we do have our budget meeting. Is there truly a need for your department to even have a vehicle? And I ask that because Commission on Aging travels hundreds of miles. Each employee, I mean, they drive to Fife Lake, they drive to Acme, hundreds of miles every day. They use their own vehicles, and the department has determined that mileage is really more beneficial. I'm just tossing that out there as something for you to consider, rather than purchasing a new vehicle. The other question I have is, these requests that you made, were you aware that the budget is going to be cut $2.4 million next year, and that every department was going to be asked to cut a substantial percentage from their budget next year? When you made these requests to the administrator, were you aware of that?
Yeah, I wasn't aware that each department was going to be asked to make 8% across the board cuts.
Well, I don't know that it's 8%. I mean, I just tossed that out there. I mean,
no.
we discussed it briefly yesterday. I mean, it could be 7%, 7.5%. I don't know the exact number, but it's going to be.
My understanding of this portion of what these were submitted for, this is each department's opportunity to submit projects to be prioritized by the county administrator, by the finance director, to determine what best suits the needs of the county for the following budget year. So I know that I know a large portion of these, if not all of them, will not get funded, but this is the first step I have as a director to communicate with the administrator, with the Board of Commissioners, that, you know what, the Blazer that we have is not in the best shape. This is my opportunity as a director to communicate that to to the Board of Commissioners, or to communicate that the Parks and Recreation Commission has a goal of creating new recreation programs. This is my opportunity to say we need a full-time Parks and Recreation programmer in order to fulfill the needs of the goal set forth by the Parks and Recreation Commission, or in order to have the pool office manned during the afternoon to pay for memberships, that we have to add a full-time secretary to that position, or to that office. This is my understanding of the budget requests in the forms that I've turned into you, is to allow department heads an opportunity to show the commission, the Board of Commissioners, what's necessary for their department. Essentially, this is a list of problems that need to be fixed, or it's a list of next steps for our department.
The next thing I'm going to address the commission on this subject, and it's a discussion that we have to have, and it's not going to be an easy discussion to have. we have to take a look at what services we may or may not choose to contract, and specifically, we have to take a look at Easling Pool. I say that because the numbers are not good coming from Easling Pool. Dean Bott, you all saw the piece of paper in your packet, well, not you, John, because you weren't here last month, but the piece of paper in your packet that I had last month, which was Dean Bott's projections for the expenses of the pool. He anticipates that labor is going to be $58,000 over budget. Now, I know that the response to that has been this summer to close the pool on weekends to cut the labor cost. The question before this commission is, and we're going to have to answer this question in budget hearings, are we going to explore leasing out Easling Pool in order to keep the facility, or what else are we going to do with the facility? Because the budget numbers that we have are so bad, we have to do something. I don't believe doing nothing is an option for this board, but it's a discussion that we're going to have. It's not going to be an easy discussion to have, but we've got to have it, and I think the appropriate time is at budget. So, Commissioner Doran.
Yeah, on that subject, Jason and Kim, if not right now, at some point in this budget process, I want to know why 28% into the year, we've used up 64% of our part-time allowance for part-time help at the Civic Center pool. And 28% into the year, we've used up 48%, almost half of our full-time allowance. I mean, what is the reason for that, and what's the fix?
We'll have those answers for you.
Thank you.
All right. How are we going to go about setting a budget meeting? Are we going to doodle? Jason?
It depends.
How are you going to, how do you plan to communicate with the board?
I by all means, doodle works well. I guess I would need better clarification with what exactly the commission wants to discuss at that time. Because based on the way the budgeting process has been handled for the county is the county sends out to different departments the specific costs for things. Like Human Resources reports back to me what they suggest we budget for the next year, just for human resource related items. And I work with other departments like facilities management and work with them in regards to projects that they're going to do that may impact our parks. So a lot of what we do, or a lot of what I put in the budget and a lot of the budget that I control is impacted by other departments and is impacted by whether or not we have to make an 8% cut across the board for our department. So depending on what this commission wants to discuss at that meeting, kind of determines when that meeting is going to be or how best to communicate it. Because some of that information has not been given to me as your director from the county administrator or the finance director's office. So I need a better idea of what exactly you want to discuss. Are we going to go through this line item by line item? Are we going to talk about the large projects? Are we going to talk about items specifically related to goals within the strategic plan? I guess for me to better answer that question, I need more information, more direction from this board.
Well, I heard Commissioner Doran suggest that you submit a budget to the Parks Board, and we start there. Unless I didn't hear correctly, but that would be... Commissioner Doran?
Yeah, I would like to, first of all, better understand what the request is that you made. Why are those new items such as employees and cars and things, or SUVs. I would like to, after hopefully getting a better understanding of what was proposed in comparison to last year's budget and 2009's actual expenses, I would like to discuss each fund. Maple Bay's a fund, Education Reserve's a fund.
Every park's a fund.
And come to a justification in my mind, or not, as to whether the level of spending is commensurate with the service that's being provided, the worth of it. Because we're going to have to start cutting.
Yeah. Commissioner McEllier?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In defense of Director, there's a big burden of timing here, and it's what we're seeing here already is an attempt at creating a budget that's going to be put to the wayside, and you're going to have to start all over. So I'm thinking, let me summarize here, that timing is such a critical issue that I believe you need to meet with the administrator and get your marching orders first about this questionable ratio that's being developed in the next couple of weeks, I think.
All department heads are going to meet with the county administrator, I believe,
Yeah.
within the next 2 weeks.
And the next, so that'll be the first step to get your bullseye, so to speak, and how to create the budget. Then you can move on to fulfilling Commissioner Doran's specifics about bringing us that budget. I would hate to have you create another budget like this that's not going to meet the expectations of. So timing is an issue. Am I being clear that apparently first you'll go to, actually first we'll do strategic planning next week. Thereafter you'll meet with the administrator. Thereafter you'll create a budget. Then we'll set a special meeting via doodle.
Okay, that's the type of direction I was looking for.
Right.
Perfect. That's
Okay.
well stated. Thank you, Kevin.
The other thing that I would like you to take a look at, Jason, is I saw in here your baseball numbers, and I noticed that you didn't put anything in a line item for department head, and I find that hard to believe that you don't have a considerable amount of time into that program. So take a look at that, and also I would like you to, I don't know how you're handling the field costs that are done by facilities. I didn't see that in, I'm not saying that it's not here, I just didn't happen to see it. That's something else that I'd like you to
And that's,
point out when we do our budget
I can
meeting.
actually address those two issues right now for you. Personnel cost related to field maintenance related to the baseball program, that's covered within the amount allocated for our baseball attendant within the HR form that I put forth for
Okay,
baseball.
all right.
I did not put my time in there because I've also budgeted or requested a recreation programmer for 2011 who would then run baseball.
Okay. All right. Anything else on budget before we move on? All right. Pool lap swim configuration. Kim?
As you guys know, I've been in contact with several of the lap swimmers since we changed over to the new configuration in March, and I've been keeping you in the loop with Judy Evans' responses as well. There are some additional, or at least one additional letter in the packet from her and some email correspondence. A lot of the complaints that are coming in are that with the additional lane lines, that it's too narrow for a lot of the lap swimmers to do their resting strokes, the breaststroke, the elementary backstroke, where the arms are really reaching out and they're really having to use the full lane. And so there's been some frustration with that. You guys have read Judy's frustration with getting bumped, and you heard Carl speak tonight as well. The second problem that we're getting a lot of complaints from, and it's just been recently since a lot of the college kids have been home, but there's a lot of unpaid, or from our perspective, from what we know, unpaid private lessons occurring. It's taking up pool space. I have suggested to several of the coaches to come at off times. I know one coach is coming in on Saturday afternoons when it's slower so that she can go ahead and meet those needs. Other coaches are saying it's, no, this is the time they like and this is when they're coming in. And what that does is those fast college kids come home and they take the fast lane, which then moves our typical fast swimmers over, which then moves those medium swimmers over. And what we've got at our pool with only having 6 lanes is when we have swimmers in the slow lane, sometimes, a lot of the time actually, they're very slow. So to move a medium swimmer into a slow lane, it's not a good fit for them as well. So the recommendation that I'm bringing forth tonight is that the LAC swim configuration return to dividing the pool into thirds, and that we leave the lanes set up the way they are with the fast in the middle, the medium, and the slow on the outside, and that we stop the practice of allowing the unpaid private lessons to occur, that private lessons go through us, and it's a revenue that we generate.
Madam Chair, request for clarification. Did we not pass a policy relative to unpaid swim lessons? Can you remind me what that policy is?
We did.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't have it for verbatim what it is, but we passed a policy allowing unpaid private lessons to occur. If they were making a profit off of them, that we were to stop them. But anyone that's not making a profit off of them is allowed to do it. We don't have a way to monitor if they're really making a profit or not. If they're being paid off-site, we don't know. All I can do is take their word for it.
Thanks for clarifying that. I'm in support of your recommendation.
Jason, before you speak, I promised that I would take public comment. So if anyone would like to make public comment on the lane configuration, you're certainly welcome to at this time. Carl?
I'm hard of hearing, so can I make another comment?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well. Yeah, it's Carl Defoe, and the only thing I would add, number one, for the benefit of the commission, Judy Evans, a house guest, was here. She made a real effort to come and speak for herself because she is so concerned, and again, because of the length of the meeting, and no fault of the commission, but she felt she had to leave. But she just wanted me to echo everything that she's said in her emails to Kim. And one thing that I failed to mention was, again, if the configuration goes back to slow, medium, and fast, it really allows a natural progression of the swimmers from the slower lane where they're going to the next faster lane, and they can easily see if the lane is clear. And I think it's a definite safety concern of mine and concern of Judy's that the fast lane is in the middle. And I really think the safety concern, the overall safety concern, really is more important than the problem of wave action from the side of the pool affecting the faster swimmers. And I think that was the primary reason the fast group was moved to the center of the pool, correct? Does anyone know? But what's the reason?
There's several. One of the main reasons is that's nationally how it's set up. So with us being a tourist community and people coming in, it's the natural flow to see it set up that way and to have it that way, as well as, with the circle swimming that we do, it's a nationally accepted way of doing it. And so when our out-of-town guests come in, they can fit right in. They don't have to figure out what's going on, which was occurring before.
I would just say that I wish more of the people that were concerned about this were here, or sent you emails or all the rest of it. But I've talked to several of the male swimmers that said, who have swam in pools all over the world, and they said this is the only one they've seen where it's a configuration of slow, fast, medium. In all the others, it's just a natural progression. And I just think there's no question, a lifeguard, senior lifeguard has told me it's much easier to keep track of slower swimmers and faster lanes, faster swimmers and slower lanes, if it's that natural progression, rather than having to look first at slow, then at fast, and then at medium. And a lot of the time I know right now is spent by the lifeguards over on the medium side with faster swimmers in the medium lanes, and some of that I know is a result of these groups being in there, groups being in there at the same time we are, which is putting tremendous pressure on the rest of us. But even if the free swimming groups are removed, I still think it's much safer having a slow, medium, and fast progression, and you can just see, well, okay, in the next lane, if there's not that many swimmers, you can move over. If your lane happens to be crowded or you're swimming a little faster, much easier to determine that than it is right now. I mean, a slower swimmer literally has to stand at the end of the pool. I know, I've done it, and look over on the far side to see if the slow portion of the medium lane is occupied. I mean, the only difference, I guess, would be where we're swimming, and I'm swimming in the slower portion of the medium lane. I can see fairly easily to the faster portion of the medium lane. If that's not as crowded as my lane is, well, I can move over. But I mean, that's only the one situation that's the same. The other, for me to try and get out of my lane and maybe swim in the slow lane, because my lane's getting crowded, in the extreme slow lane, I mean, I literally almost have to get out of the pool to see over there how many swimmers are there, all the rest of it. And, the same way with a slow swimmer who wants to move up to the slower part of the medium lane. I mean, it's really a problem for them. So I just really think I urge you to go back to the old configuration.
Thank you, Carl.
I just think it's too dangerous a situation the way it is, and that's more important than protecting the faster swimmers from the wave action on the side of the pool.
Thank you, Carl. Well, I'm weighing in on this. I went over tonight to the pool. By the way, there was no one in the office when I got there. And I measured the lane line, and it is 5.5 inches. We are talking about taking out 16.5 inches of lane line if we take out the lane lines that are in between lanes 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. 15 inches. 16.5, I'm sorry. The purpose of putting the lap lanes in is to attract swimmers, memberships. And, if we are going to implement LUTRA, that's fine. If we're not going to implement LUTRA, that's fine as well. But this is a recommendation. It's done. Lane lines are used. I went to 9 swimming pools, and Carl, I disagree with you on this. I went to 9 swimming pools while I was on vacation in 2.5 weeks, and every single pool has lane lines. It is a common practice to swim counterclockwise in one lane. It's a national standard. I understand that some of the swimmers are frustrated with the change, but it hasn't been given, in my opinion, enough of a chance for people to acclimate and get used to it. Change is difficult for everyone. No one likes to do things a different way. We are all creatures of habit. It's going to take some time to get used to swimming with lane lines when you've never done it. And virtually this pool is the only place I've ever been where there has been no lane lines in between two lanes. So that's my opinion. Commissioner Larson and then Commissioner Doran.
Well, I strongly oppose the recommendation. Much of it is similar to what Commissioner Max Bauer says, but I feel as passionately in completely the opposite direction as Mrs. Evans has expressed. And so to flip over the apple cart and undo what we've done following the Lutra report without really thinking this over a lot more, I think would be a grave error. And so, yes, you've been getting pounded with emails and complaints. I understand that. And I can pound you with emails the opposite way as well, saying that I've been a swimmer for 35 years and I've had more collisions at this pool in that counter-rotating, no lane line situation than ever before. I've had collisions that are sometimes dangerous, and so I can say the exact same thing as she does about the old system, and that the new system, to me, the new system, which is the standard out there in the world, is just wonderful. I love coming to the pool. To me, it is exactly the opposite of what she describes. Before, it was coming to the pool was a very stressful event. I contemplated giving it up forever just because I hated coming to the pool. And now with the lane lines, I find it to be very relaxing. It's a good way for me to unwind when I'm able to make it over there. And so my point is not that you have to do what I say. My point is that there are opinions that are on the complete opposite end of the spectrum as what's been expressed. And so moving forward on a recommendation without fully exploring where we want to go with the pool, who we want our clientele to be, and what the Lutra report means to us, I think would be a mistake. And I'll just for a moment touch on that. The pool's hemorrhaging money. We're tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars in the hole every year, or a taxpayer subsidy would be a better way to express that. And that's to be expected at some level. Lutra's report was, look, you can make this better. It doesn't have to be so bad, and here are the recommendations that we have to try to make this better. And so for 30-something years, or whatever the right number is, we've been doing it a certain way, and the numbers just keep getting worse. And so Lutra is saying, try it a different way. And it's going to take some time. It may take 2 years. It may take 3 years. We've talked about that before in this place. And you'll attract more swimmers, a different swimmer. And so I would really strongly object to just flipping that over after 10 or 11 weeks of trying this.
Commissioner Doran?
I don't think that experts are always right, but in this case, there's clearly, in my mind, not enough facts and opinions to overturn an expert recommendation. It's my understanding that this is contrary to Lutra. Everybody seems to accept that, so I'm going to stick with the Lutra report. We adopted it, and it should be implemented. I don't remember exactly, but I don't think we said, and correct me if I'm wrong if you find out, I don't think we said that it's okay to have unpaid private lessons. What we prohibited was paid private lessons.
Right, which then allows the unpaid, though.
Right, because of the, in my humble opinion, the way that had been applied was unreasonable, having it applied to relatives and who are teaching people how to swim. So I won't be in favor of this recommendation, either side of it.
Anyone else?
Just for the record, I want to state I'm grateful for my colleagues. I stand corrected. I thought that this recommendation was in line with Lutra. This is very confusing. What was driving my opinion was the safety issue that Ms. Evans has repeatedly brought up. But now hearing from colleagues that are swimming in the pool, I am not. I'll admit I believe I made a mistake, and it believes that I will not be supporting the recommendation.
Moving on, Scholarship Committee appointment. This...
Commissioner Maxwell.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Karstens?
I'm hearing that we want to give Lutra more time, and it may take 3 years. And so we shouldn't expect money to be rolling in as a result of instituting it. At the same time, I'm hearing that because of economic constraints, we're thinking of leasing the pool out. And so if we do that, will Lutra continue?
What Lutra says is, number one, it really boils down to three things. Number one, it says cut labor, cut your labor expense. That can be done, and it can be done tomorrow. It does say that your number two focus is on your memberships. And it does say that your memberships are going to take 2 to 3 years to build. By configuring the pool for your members, your lap swimmers, your people who have swum in college, etc., you are going to attract more members. And I can tell you that I have been in the lobby at the pool talking to parents who are having their children taught lessons, and they tell me that they don't swim in our pool or didn't swim in our pool in the past because of the lane configurations. So, you know, Commissioner Larson is exactly right. It does go both ways. So it does say, number one, you cut labor, and that hasn't been done. Number two, you increase memberships. I can ask, how many membership drives have we had in the last year, 6 months? I haven't seen one. I'm a member. That doesn't mean we haven't had them, but I haven't seen any. Number three, it says, pay attention to your contribution margin. You have your fixed costs, and you have your variable cost of labor. And after you cover your fixed cost, after you cover your expense of your hourly wage, your labor, anything beyond that in that hour is a contribution towards your fixed expenses. That's your contribution margin. Our contribution margin has gone south big time. So I don't want to I echo Commissioner Larson. I don't want to mess with the pool lap configuration at this time. I want to give members, the public, I want to have them become aware that we are operating our pool like all the other pools in the nation operate. I want them to come in. I want them to buy memberships. I think the reason that the pool is bleeding is because of the staffing, and I believe it's overstaffing. And I can give specific examples, but I won't do that at this time, unless you want them.
So Lutra, as a system to employ it, doesn't include staffing?
Oh, it does say, it does give you staffing. Absolutely, it tells you staffing. It actually gives you schedules. There are printed schedules in Lutra. Do you have a copy of that report, Commissioner Karstens?
I don't believe so.
I've got extras at home. I'll see that you get one at the Rules Committee Monday morning. All right.
My need to come to that meeting, I think, has been diminished because of...
Oh, that's true.
So-
I'm sorry. I'll get you one.
Okay.
Next on our agenda is the Scholarship Committee appointment. I want to tell you a little bit about my recommendation. We had interviews for the Commission on Aging Board, and Nancy Parker Reed, and I will tell you, I've known Nancy since I was 5 years old, came and interviewed for the Commission on Aging Board. She was asked by 2 county commissioners to come back and re-interview. However, she was not selected for the Commission on Aging Board primarily because we were looking for someone geographically in the South County, and Nancy doesn't live in South County. But I called Nancy, she gave a wonderful interview, and I called Nancy after the Commission on Aging selection, and she was telling me that how much she misses children and how she really wants to do something with kids, and she was a former school teacher. And I said, would you help us on the scholarship committee? And she said, well, I'd love to. Nancy, being a substitute teacher and a retired school teacher, she's willing to go out to the schools and talk to kids about taking swim lessons and taking advantage of the scholarships. I think she'll be a wonderful asset to the committee, and so I'm asking for a nomination for her appointment.
So moved.
Is there support?
Support.
Discussion? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Same. Motion carries. Next on the agenda is the Parks and Rec Commission resignation. We have a resignation letter from Commissioner Byrne. I would like to take this opportunity to thank her for the many hours that she contributed to the Parks and Rec Department and to the county. She will be missed, and even though we often disagree, she forces, when someone disagrees with you, you're forced to make a better argument, or you lose the vote. So anyway, I certainly wish her the best. Next, we have on our agenda...
Commissioner...
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Doran?
Do you think she'd reconsider? I don't see a reason why Chris gave. I mean, she was very energetic and earnest, and had a lot of good input all the time, a lot of energy. Was wondering if she'd reconsider.
I certainly would be happy to call and ask her.
Okay. Could we table this until the next meeting then?
We certainly can.
Thank you.
All right, Director's report.
The only item I have for the commission is our next step in the strategic planning process is going to be June 29th at 6 p.m. based on the input from the Doodle survey that each of you partook in. June 29th is going to be our next strategic planning meeting at 6 p.m. It will more than likely be held at the Civic Center. There are a couple things that we wanted to work out. We will be letting you know exactly where that's going to be. But be looking forward to that. So some information will come out. I'll try and have information out to you next Tuesday related to this. Other than that, that's the majority of what I needed to report on. I reported on during new and old business.
Real quick, I just wanted to touch base on the strategic planning. One of the things I didn't tell the commission is I'm doing my master's right now on organizational management. I've got 2 more classes to go. Tuesdays are my night for class. So unfortunately, I won't be able to make it. With that being said, I have really liked what I've been hearing, the values, the principles, and the way the strategic process goes. So I commend you on all of you on that. I think there's some broad minds going forward. Is there going to be a facilitator for the strategic planning?
Yes.
Excellent. Good. Who's the facilitator?
Paula Segala.
Okay.
Was June 29 the only date that popped up for everybody?
Yes.
Okay, so we can't, either we lose lose John or we lose the date.
I would like, Pete, possible if maybe we could talk either Monday or Tuesday or even tomorrow.
Sure.
Excellent, good.
Okay.
There is a rules committee Monday?
Yeah, well,
Well, there you go.
That's true, too.
He's
Yeah.
on the Rules Committee. Commissioner Larson.
perfect.
I have a question for Jason. I've committed Commissioner Fowle, and I just had a couple of questions about the budget report, which was in the receive and file. Would it be all right if I asked just a couple of questions for clarification on the budget numbers from this year so far? Commissioner Max Bauer?
Oh, certainly.
Would that be all right?
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I thought you were directing your question to Jason.
On page 19, on the baseball, we had budgeted $64,200 for, I guess, what would be the program tuition fees or the sign-up fees as revenue, and we've realized $35,000 and change, which is significantly less than we had planned. Does that mean that baseball will operate with a $30,000 deficit?
No, it won't. That number was anticipated with 800 kids, 750 kids. We have 550 kids. Our expenditures are in proportion with the revenues that have come in, because the expenditures we put out were in line. In order, the equipment we purchased, our expenditures are based on the number of kids in the program.
All right, so you expect baseball will do okay?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. A second question is on page 27, on the Twin Lakes property, under the revenue section, we budgeted $50,000 in anticipated rent. We realized about $7,000 of that. I realize that Twin Lakes is available all year long. Does that low rent number concern you with regard to our ability to make budget numbers? Again, it's a significant deficit from what was planned.
We're just getting into the busy season with rentals there, first and foremost. To say that we're going to hit 50,000, I have a hard time believing that, simply because with some of the state requirements and with the poor economic times, we've lost 3 of our major camps that occur out there, one being Olivet Band Camp. It was about a $15,000 revenue.
Wow.
And they're not returning this year due to cost for travel from Olivet. We also lost, there's a camp from the Gaylord Archdiocese that came out. Because of cost, they're not coming out again this year. And we had 2 other camps that went from 5-day camps down to 4-day camps because of new laws related to day camps at a facility like ours. So, due to some things that are out of control, we've lost some serious revenues out there. Although we have seen a larger number of rentals to the property due to the pavilion. These revenues will not make up for the lost revenues from those camps, but it may ease the blow a bit.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Doran.
Just out of curiosity, on the Nature Education Reserve, it looks like the contract services line item is $46,400. Is that the contract amount for the Conservation District? This is Fund 275.
Down in 818, yes, that is that contract.
And then, so there's another $15,000 on top of that? So we provide staff, some staff, as well as
What page is that?
Page 24.
24.
And that's something I wanted to, thanks for bringing it up. Page 24, although at the top it says 753 Maple Bay, that's a typo. It's 758 Natural Education Reserve, and that's what we're talking about. There are other expenditures with that. They're pretty minor expenditures. One of the items is department head. My salary is broken down over a variety of different departments or activities. This is one of them, so that's that initial $6,000. Full-time and regular employees, I'd have to get clarification on you clarification for you on that. The other items, the longevity, the personal leave, FICA, et cetera, are all things associated with those two, with me as the department head.
Yeah, I was just wondering what we did on top of what the Conservation District did.
The only thing I have, or that I'd have to clarify is that $3,200.
Thank you.
All right. This is the second opportunity for public comment. Seeing none, notices and commissioner comments. I just have one, and I just wanted to let everybody know that Russ Clark and I met with Danny Brown and Paul Johnson on trees. And we identified areas at the Civic Center where memorial trees can be planted. We identified, actually, I shouldn't say we, I sat there and smiled and nodded. Russ Clark and Paul Johnson and Danny Brown really did this. Russ Clark gave a list of trees that will, he believes, thrive at the Civic Center. Paul Johnson identified areas where trees are dying and need to be replaced now. And the Facilities Department has agreed when someone buys a tree in memory of someone to plant the tree and take care of the tree. They will even annually go out and pick up the trees and bring them back to the Civic Center. So the program, we're getting a few of the details ironed out, but it looks like this is going to happen sooner than later.
Great.
Wonderful.
All right. And again, thank you to Paul Johnson for coming up with the idea, and I thanked him again this week. I said, geez, this was good. All right. Any other commissioner comments or notices? Commissioner Karstens.
I wanted to comment on what took place at my meeting at the Nature Education Reserve.
Yes.
And they indicated to me that they had presented this commission with some rules for approval approximately 3 years ago, and we're impatiently asking that some movement be made on these, and so that they could have them and post them and what have you for their activities there. And so
All right.
so as our representative with them, they did, anyway, I didn't remember till earlier today to ask them to send a PDF to acquire them.
Okay.
But anyway, they would really be pleased if we would act on them in some way. And so I presented them at least so that we could look at them and maybe act on them at the next meeting.
Okay, we can certainly take a look at this Monday morning at Rules. Jason?
I just wanted to clarify about that issue. If those were given to the commission 3 years ago, it was before the Rules Committee and before we even addressed rules. Those were given to us probably a year ago, and they were submitted to the Rules Committee for further discussion as specifically suggested rules by the NER for the Nature Education Reserve property. And the Rules Committee at that time, if I recall, said that we would address those when we get to the individualized park rules. So it
Well,
is
we
something
can-
that's been on file with the Rules Committee.
If it's been sitting that long, we can do something about it. Commissioner Doran?
There's some real nice maps of the Education Reserve showing the trails and delineating them. Are those either online or in our Parks Inventory book?
I don't know that they're in our Parks Inventory book because they're newer than our Parks Inventory book.
I'd like to get a copy if you can get one from Conservation District, or if you guys have got one in your office, I'd like to.
Sure.
I'd like to see where these areas are that they want the rules applied.
Sure.
Get a better handle on that.
And Jason, would you please include this in Harry Leipzig's mailing for the
Absolutely.
Rules Committee tomorrow? Thank you. All right. I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved. Supported.
All in favor? Aye. We're adjourned.